Hi everyone, welcome to Make It Monday. I'm Angie. Today we are going to make this paper pieced kind of mixed media type ornament. It's not super mixed media in the terms of it doesn't have a lot of texture and things like that to it, but we'll be using a lot of elements to create this. So this is the sample that I have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a wood-based ornament. So this is the ornament that we're going to use. I found these at Hobby Lobby in a package of 6 for $2.49. Very inexpensive. So this is what we're going to use to build our ornament on top of with paper. So the next thing you need to do is choose some paper. I'm just going to set my sample out of the way. I went through my scraps of Christmas paper and chose some papers that I thought would work well together to create my ornament. This bigger piece is a 4x4 piece that I'm going to use just to cover the back side of my ornament. So that is the paper. So as far as choosing papers, say you don't have scrapbook paper like this. You can find packs of scrapbook paper fairly inexpensively at the craft store. I found these at Joann's. They were $1.99. The nice thing about papers like this is they usually all coordinate color-wise, so they're very easy to mix and match. You also can get like bigger pads of paper like this if you want, depending on how much you're going to do. So, and if you don't want to do any of that and you want to upcycle, you can take like old Christmas cards and cut those apart and use those. So the possibilities as far as paper goes, you can use whatever you can find. The only thing I would not recommend would be wrapping paper. I think it's too thin. You need something that's going to kind of hold up. So keep that in mind when you're choosing what you want to use. All right. So the first thing we need to do is kind of lay our papers out. And I'm going to try and do this upside down. The other thing I'm going to do is take, if I can find my scissors here, is I'm going to cut this string off. I didn't really care for these ribbons that came with the ornament. You can choose to use them or choose not to. I just want to get it out of my way. So what I'm going to do is I've already kind of pre-cut these. But this was kind of my source piece that I wanted to start with. So I always kind of pick a piece of paper that has a design that I want to start with. And I liked the fact that this had the word joy kind of in the middle of it. So that was kind of where I started. And then I went through my stash and picked pieces of paper that I thought would go well with this. So I found this piece here and it kind of has the same reds as this. So I'm going to use this as my top piece. And this piece is about 1 inch wide. And then I'm going to probably butt this up against this so that my word joy is kind of in the middle. And then I wanted to bring in something a little different. So I brought this, and it also has kind of the same gold coloring that are in the words. And then I brought in just this little strip of green paper. Now looking at it that way, it doesn't look like much, but what I used to help me see what it's going to look like is I took just a scrap piece of paper and I die cut a hole in the middle of it. And then what I do is I lay this over the top, and that gives me a good idea of what my ornament is going to look like. The other thing you want to remember is I kind of go by a rule of thirds. So you don't want your ornament to be totally split down the middle. You want it to kind of be offset a little bit. It's a little more pleasing to the eye than having everything straight down the middle. Now this one isn't as offset as it could be. So if you think about dividing your ornament into thirds, you either want to go 2/3 and have like 1/3 be this part of it, or like this for the top and bottom. It's kind of divided into thirds as far as there's 3 different sections. So keep that in mind when you're laying things out. And as far as width of paper, you know, if you stick to pretty much, if you're doing a horizontal design like this, like that middle piece, you probably don't want that more than 2 inches. Your ornament is about 4 inches by 4 inches. It's slightly smaller than that. So you want to keep that in mind as well when you're cutting your papers. And you could do just, you know, one overall paper if you wanted. I just like the idea of piecing papers together to make it look different. So that is how we're going to start. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is glue our papers down to our project. And what we're going to use to do that is some Mod Podge, or Mod Podge. This is the matte one. I prefer the matte one over the glossy one. I don't want this to be shiny. So this is what we're going to use. I always put a piece of cling wrap over the top of my jar just to help keep it from drying out. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take and get a little bit of Mod Podge on our brush. And I'm going to put the Mod Podge on the ornament itself. I don't want to put it on the paper because that makes it bubble. And I don't want to, you know, get too gloppy around the edges, so I'm being real careful about where this is going. And you want a fairly good coating, but you don't want it to be super thick. So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit around the top. Okay, and then I'm going to place my first piece down, and I need to do this upside down so I can see what I'm doing here. Let's see, I wanted this way. So I'm going to take this, and I want to make sure that my edge is over the edge. We'll trim this off after it dries. Okay, so then I'm going to just press my piece into place. And you'll notice that it doesn't cover way up in here. That is going to get covered up when we put our embellishments on, so I'm not going to worry about that area. So we've got our first piece down, and then we're going to move on to our next piece. And this is going to be the bigger main piece that we're using. So again, we're going to put a nice layer of Mod Podge. And I try to go just a little bit beyond where I'm going to be, but not all the way down to the bottom, because then it just gets in my way. All right. So now I want to center this, and I want to butt it right up against that piece of paper that I already put down, so that there is no gap in the seam. And the Mod Podge, you know, because it's still wet, allows you to move it just a little bit until it sets up. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then again, I'm just kind of smoothing it down with my fingers to make sure that it adheres well all the way to the edges. Okay, so now I have just my 2 bottom pieces left. So again, I'm just putting a nice layer of this down. And let's see, which way do I want this to go? I think I want this on this side. And again, I'm going to kind of go just about 2/3 of the way across the bottom. And I'm going to, again, butt it right up against. I don't want it to really go underneath that previous piece. I want it to just butt up against the edge. And then I'm going to take this green piece, and I'm going to slide that in right there. right up against the two edges. And a little bit of Mod Podge oozed out there, but it's going to be okay because that's why I chose the matte one, because it will dry with a matte finish and not a glossy finish. Okay, so now I'm just going to press over the whole thing to make sure everything is adhered down. Now, there's a couple different ways. I'm going to actually trim off this excess here so that it's out of the way. The next thing you need to do is let this dry. I'm going to go ahead, and so for the back side, I'm just going to explain this. I like to let one side dry so that I can trim it and then put the next side on and then let that dry and trim it. So for the back side, what you're going to do is you're going to put Mod Podge all over the whole thing. You're going to place your piece of paper down. Don't cover this back side. I just left that blank. You can see that on the back of this one. I just left it blank at the top, just that wood top, and I think that looks just fine. So you will place your backing on, and then you will let that dry. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and let the two sides dry, and we'll be back to continue on. All right, we are ready to move on to our next step. So I went ahead and trimmed the front of my ornament, and then I glued my back piece on. And I just want to show you how I trimmed that up. So all I do is just take my scissors and following along the edge of the ornament, I'm just going to cut right up against the wood. And you're going to just do the best you can. You don't want a lot of white overhang. You also can kind of tip your scissors a little bit so that it cuts in a little bit. So you're just going to trim all the way around it until you remove everything. So I've got that part, but because I'm right-handed, it's really hard for me to get in there, so I just flip it over and then just trim it from the back side. Okay, so you can see that the edges look a little bit rough from being trimmed. How we're going to tackle that is we're going to sand it. Now this is just a 3M sanding block. I don't know if they still make these. You can just use regular sandpaper. All you're going to do is just sand up against the edge just to kind of smooth that paper out. The other thing you can use is like a nail file. And we're just, like I said, we're just going to go up against the edge. Yeah, it's going to show a little bit of white there because the paper has a white core. Again, don't worry about that too much because we are going to fix the edges of that as well. So you're just going to go all the way around your ornament. It's just going to kind of smooth out any of those jagged edges so that everything looks rounded and smooth. A little bit back here. It also will just shave off any of those little bits of paper that you missed. Whoop. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add just a little bit of texture and things to the background using some rubber stamps. I don't know how many of you are rubber stampers. I have been a stamper for many, many years. So I have quite a collection of stamps. This is an optional step. You don't have to do this. I like it because I feel like it adds some depth to the background a little bit. But again, this is not a necessary step. You can leave it just like this without doing that. So what I'm going to use is what they call an archival ink. This is a a waterproof ink. And I recommend that because if you decide to seal your ornament at the end, if you don't use a waterproof ink, the ink is going to smear everywhere. If you're choosing not to stamp, it's not going to matter. So this is a little hard to see, but this is a clear stamp with some music notes on it. And I'm just going to add a little bit of this. And I like this to blend into the background a little bit. So I'm going to just ink up this kind of randomly. I don't want to ink straight to the edges because I don't want a harsh edge on the edge. And then I'm just going to flip this over and I'm going to just stamp it part way in. And it's going to kind of blend into the background. It's going to be there so you can kind of see it right in here. And then I'm going to ink it up again. This time I'm going to smooth that back edge, this edge a little bit with just a rag. And then I'm going to come in down in here and stamp it again. So you can kind of see that it just adds a little something. All right, so the next thing we're going to add is, like, I have this little Post-it note stamp, or little postage stamp. I like round circle stamps for some reason. It just is kind of my thing. So I'm going to ink that up with a little bit darker brown ink. I'm actually going to stamp it off just to make sure it's not super dark. This way I can see. And I'm going to take and bring that in. Let's see, where do I want that? I'm going to kind of go off the edge of the paper over here. And again, I'm going to stamp it off once just to lighten up the ink a little bit. And I'm going to stamp it there. And I don't care if this is not perfect stamping. It doesn't need to be perfect stamping. Like I said, it's just to add a little bit of texture and things to the background. And then the next thing I'm going to take is a word stamp. Now this is a really big stamp, but because it's not on a block, I can actually pick different parts and choose what I want to go on there. So I'm going to, let's see, I want kind of this upper corner here. And again, I'm going to take and soften the edges a little bit with my rag. This just makes it not quite such a harsh edge. And then I'm just going to press it to add a little bit of text there. And again, I'm using the little bit lighter ink. And again, I'm just going to dab a little bit with my cloth. And I'm going to bring that down here a little bit. Oh, I think I actually stamped that upside down. But you know what? It doesn't matter because it's just a texture. We're just looking to add some interest to the background. Let's see. And I'm going to take this upper corner here. It's got a nice little snowflake on it. Again, I'm going to just dab a little bit. And I'm going to stamp that right up in there. And it might not be seen with our other stuff. Okay, and I think I like how that looks. So I'm just going to leave it like that. So that you can kind of see just adds some texture and a little bit of interest. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take this same kind of ink, and this is just what they call a finger dauber, and I'm going to press it on the ink pad and get some of that ink onto the sponge dauber. And this is how we're going to fix our edges. We're just going to brush around the edges. With this ink. And we're going to do this kind of on the front. So all you're doing is just brushing against the edge. What this does is it darkens the edge, which draws your eye more to the center of your ornament. Now, you could do this, say you were using blues and you don't want to use a brown. You can do this same type of thing with some white paint. So if I had an ornament that I was using more blues and, or I wanted more of a snowy scene, then I would go ahead and use some white paint. And if I was going to do that, I would take like a sponge applicator like this and just get a little bit of paint on and then sponge it off, and then you would just sponge around your outer edge. Okay, so we're also going to do this to the back of our ornament. Like I said, those white edges of your paper, this will ink those so that they don't show white. That's why I said your cutting doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, because we're going to hide it. Just get that little spot that was white there. And it doesn't matter that I got a little bit on the back there. Just makes it look like it's a little more vintagey. All right. So that is the base part of our ornament. Okay, we're getting there. So the next thing we're going to do is work with some embellishments to go on this. Now this could be anything. Again, I'm a paper crafter, so I have die cut paper things here. You could use mini silk flowers at the top here. You could just tie a ribbon bow. It can be anything you want. It does not necessarily have to be paper embellishments if you don't have that. So again, the point of this whole project is to use what you have. Again, just dig around, see what you have that you can embellish this with. So we have some die cut paper pieces. So and I kind of work in twos. So I've got two of these, two of these, two of these, and a poinsettia. And I like to make the greens a little bit different color, and how I choose those greens is based on the colors in my paper. So things like this, they may seem a bit long. You always can tear them, make them shorter. So don't feel like it has to be as long as the punched out item. This one I'm going to trim up a little bit too. And I'm just tearing it with my fingers. You could use the scissors as well. So I'll end up placing those kind of like that. And then I'll have these blue-green, more blue-green pieces. And then I'll put my poinsettia there. And then I've got like these half leaves. Move over here a little bit. And those I'll probably just tuck right underneath. But I want to jazz these up a little bit. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to get stuff ready for the next step, and we'll be back in just a minute. All right, we are ready to move on to decorating our little bit of embellishments here. So we've got all these pieces here. There's a couple different things you can do. You could take your brown ink pad if you want it to look more vintagey and add brown ink to the edges. You can also do that with some green ink. If I wanted to darken the edges of these a little bit, I can just take some green ink and brush those on. Again, these are not necessary steps. It's just a way to add a little bit of color variation to things so that they don't look so flat. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of green ink to the tips of these. And again, this is that same type of archival ink that I'm using so that it doesn't. And then the other thing you can do is you can add a little bit of white paint to them. So I've got just a little bit of white acrylic paint. And I'm just going to drag some out here. I want to thin it out just a little bit. And then I'm just going to take it on the edge of my branches. I'm just going to brush the tips with this, and you want to do this real lightly, which is why you want your paint to be thin. We're just going to brush the edges so it looks like snow. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the regular paint and put it in here. And we're just going to take our brush and just brush the tips. Okay, this one, it looks like it got a little bit too watered down because I lost a little bit of my whiteness, so I'm just going to go back over this one a little bit. Alright, so I've got those painted, and I'm going to do the same thing with these green ones. Here's my other one. Just going to get this painted. All right. Then I'm going to let those dry just a little bit. They won't take very long to dry. And I'm going to rinse my brush off. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a little bit of sparkle to them. So this is just some Stickles glitter glue. You can find this pretty much in any craft store. But instead of applying it with the tip, I actually like to apply it with a paintbrush. So I'm just going to squeeze just a little bit of this out. Whoop, I think my bottle is clogged here. Oh, let me just grab a pin and unclog. All right, I'm just going to unclog this with a pin. I always keep a pin in my craft room for things like that. Just going to squeeze a little bit out. And then I'm going to pick it up with my paintbrush and just lightly brush it on the edges, and this is going to add just a little bit of sparkle. And I don't want to overdo it, but if you really like glitter, you can certainly add more than I'm doing. It just gives me more control, which is why I like to use the paintbrush to add this. And again, I'm just kind of doing it on the tips, similar to what I did with the paint. So again, just picking it up and brushing it just on the tips. I'm going to do the same thing to these. It's always nice to have a little bit of sparkle in your Christmas ornaments. So again, just putting this on. And then you want to make sure that you clean your paintbrush off really good after this. Put it straight into water, because that glitter glue, if it dries on there, it's not coming off. All right. And then on my red flower, I'm going to add just a little bit of this to the tips, not a ton. I just want it just on the tips. So I'm just kind of going at it from the side just to add a little bit of sparkle to that flower. And I'm going to go back over this one just a little bit. All right, so we've got that on there. And then we're just going to set those aside to dry. I'm not going to do any on these leaves here. All right. So we're going to let those dry, and then we'll be back to kind of glue those in place and finish up everything. Okay, all of our pieces are dry, so now it's time to assemble them at the top of our ornament. So what I'm going to do is just take some craft tacky glue. This is just a white craft glue, and I'm going to put just a little bit, maybe. I think I got a clogged bottle again. Let me open that up here. There we go. I'm going to put a little bit of glue. I don't want to put glue all the way down because I want it to kind of flow a little bit. I don't want it to be flat down onto the surface. So I'm just going to tack that down right underneath the top of it. I think I'm going to angle that just a little bit more here. Actually, I want to rip that little piece off of there, it's in the way. All right, so there's the first one. And these ornaments are kind of nice because now I know, by the loops, I know where the center is. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to build from the back forward. Okay, and then I'm just going to press that into place. And the craft tacky glue gives you a little time to move it around if you need to. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my pine sprigs here. Actually, I want that to go down a little bit, I think. Tweezers here just to help me press that into place. All right, this one's going to go right about there. And then next I'm going to put my poinsettia piece in place. That's going to go right in the center. And I'm going to put that on with a little piece of double-sided foam tape. This is going to just lift it up off the background a little bit. So I'm just going to put that right in the center on the back and then peel off the back side. And that's sticky on both sides. And I'm going to position this. This is where my tweezers kind of comes in handy. I'm going to position that just like that. And I haven't forgotten about my green leaves, but I can tuck those in because that's raised up a little bit. I can tuck these in by just putting a little bit of glue on the base of them. And I'm just going to tuck that right underneath that petal there with my tweezers, and then I'm just going to stick my tweezers in there and push it down. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just going to pick this up a little bit. Slide that right underneath there. Actually, I want that tipped down just a little bit so they don't look too identical there. Again, I'm just going to take my tweezers, tuck it underneath there, and just press it down with my tweezers. Okay, so we've got kind of our embellishments at the top. Before I add the gem to the poinsettia, I want to add some white spatter to this. White spatter is just going to kind of pull everything together. So I'm going to grab, this is my spatter box. It's just to keep things, hopefully I get this in the middle so you can see. It's just to keep things from getting all over my entire work surface. So I still have a little bit of that white paint left on my palette here. I just kind of covered it up. And again, I'm going to just dilute it down with some water. And then I'm going to just take and tap my paintbrush. And you'll see that we're getting white spatter. The smaller the paintbrush, the smaller the spatter, which is what I like. If you wanted big drops of spatter, you would use a bigger paintbrush. This is a number 2 round paintbrush that I'm using. And maybe just a little bit more. And it can go on your greens. So I'm just going to come up towards the top a little bit just to get some white spatter on those. And that looks good to me. So I'm going to carefully take that out. Get rid of my spatter box. All right. And normally I would let that paint dry, but for filming purposes, we are going to speed this up. So the next thing I want to do is add just a little bit of sparkle to the center of my poinsettia. And these are just self-adhesive gems. So they already have the sticky on the back. And I like to use a pin to pick those up with. That glue off of there. So I just take my pin and put it underneath. Then I can pick it right up on my pin and place it, right in the center of my poinsettia flower. All right, so the last thing we need to do is add some ribbon. I don't think this is the ribbon that I want, but I'll just show you how to do it with this one, because I think this is too red for my ornament. So here, actually let me do it on this one. So all you would do is you need about 8 to 10 inches of ribbon. You would feed your ribbon through the hole. This is a 1/4 inch wide ribbon. Feed it through the hole, take the 2 ends, tie them in a knot together. So you just do like an overhand knot like this, where the 2 ends would be together, and then just pull and then just trim off with your scissors. And then your ornament is finished. All right, I hope you enjoyed this project. Like I said, be inventive with it. There's many ways you can do it. If you didn't want to embellish with greenery, you could use snowflakes on there. There's all kinds of different things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a poinsettia at the top or something. You could use a snowflake. So embellish it however you want. All right. Thank you everyone for joining me. I hope everyone has a very happy holiday season and that you are all blessed with a good new year. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.